as you said, my history in actually getting here to this point, in part because you are doing the things that did not exist in Montana when I was growing up and getting started. So I grew up in Shelby, which is way up by the Alberta border. Town of maybe 3,000 people on a busy day. And it was for me, and my great grandfather homesteaded up there before statehood. That was home, and it was cold. And I just thought, let's go see a little of the rest of the world. So I was an undergraduate at Stanford, and to give you an idea of the timing, when I was, I think, sophomore or probably a junior, senior, that's when the first Apple Macintosh came out. And we got them like at cost there on the Stanford campus. So I started using, personal computers with the Macintosh right then, and probably should have, at that point, I think it was too late to change my major from political science and strategic weapons management to computer science, or things would have been different. But that was the era, right? Beginning then. I went to Georgetown for law school. I came back to San Francisco and was working in a big corporate law firm, trying to make as much money as possible. And what started my entrepreneurial journey actually was a tragedy. The law firm that I had joined out of Georgetown was the site of the 101 California shooting on July 1st, 1993. And I lost friends and colleagues, and it was a traumatic experience for me. And so I did what I thought was rational at the time, which was to quit the big firm practice of the law and join a rock band, as Carl mentioned. And needless to say, I did not become a rock star, but I met a lot of people in the entertainment and artistic community around the Bay Area, and wound up becoming an entertainment attorney as a result, because that's what my clients wanted. Excuse me, that was responsive to what the needs were. And so that's what I did. I started a law firm. After a couple of years, I had a couple of cool, neat, high-profile cases, and they made me the professor of entertainment law at Hastings, which is the University of California Law School there in San Francisco. And this was just as the Napster-fueled .com boom took off. So I was at ground zero at really the beginning of digital media before we even called it that. We actually called it convergence media in the early to mid 90s. And I had people coming to me, and I had like an AOL account. That was the extent of my knowledge in the area, but coming to me and saying, well, how do we release music on the internet? How do we release movies on the internet? And so I became a really digital media and startup attorney, where I did all the corporate work as well. So sort of soup to nuts, you've got a dream, I can help you make your dream come true. And at the same time, I also continued to engage in my own entrepreneurial activity. So I formed a record label with my then wife, who had been on a big major label. She's a very talented artist, and she had a major label record deal. And again, just as Napster was starting and things like that, we looked at, all right, what are the opportunities here for someone like her who had more of a niche following? She wasn't a big superstar, but she had plenty of fans. But through the big label, by the time she got paid on that, it wasn't really enough to make a living at anymore. And so for her, it was like, well, if we kept all the money instead of giving most of it to the big label, we can still do this ourselves. We're getting to a point here where you can produce things for less money. You can create CDs then for less money. So we formed a record label, and that was sort of the first company other than my law firm that I formed. And I've followed that process really forever. I've continued to represent entrepreneurial startups, mostly in the digital media world, but not always. And I've continued to have my own startups. So I had the record label Seventh Wave in the 90s. In 2000, I got the opportunity to move down to Los Angeles and form a film production company with one of the boys from NSYNC, right at the height of their career. So I went from like representing the Jefferson Airplane to being in business with NSYNC kind of overnight. It was very strange. But again, still continuing to represent these kind of video on demand companies before their time and things like that. So yeah, we rode out the .com boom and bust. Then there was the big buildup really of social networks and digital media. I represented one of the first social media companies, was called Super Dudes, and it was a be your own superhero kind of gaming portal with a lot of social media elements that ultimately was purchased by MySpace, before MySpace was purchased by Fox, before Facebook made all of that irrelevant. So yeah, definitely ups and downs. Eventually, I wound up leaving Los Angeles just because I was tired of really the Hollywood kind of thing. And I wound up in wine country where I decided I wanted to write a novel. But I immediately met yet another entrepreneur with another great idea. And he had had a successful education technology startup in the late 90s, early 2000s that he'd sold for a lot of money. And the non-compete clauses from that sale had expired. And he kind of wanted to put the band back together and do another ed tech company only using online distribution. And that company became StudySync. I co-founded that company with Robert Romano and two other folks, and it's since become extremely successful. And interestingly, is one of those things that was on its way to tremendous success already when COVID-19 hit. And you think of pivots as generally being, oh, I'm going in the wrong direction, I need to pivot into the right direction. They were going in the right direction and pivoted into an even more right direction. So all of a sudden, it's like what they were offering as a supplement and as additional opportunities for teachers to engage with their students suddenly became something that was like a turnkey distance learning solution. Boom. And so you found them suddenly pivoting, you know, from good to better. And I think that's what's fun about startups. And that's what's great about what I found here in Montana, because when I came back, I had no idea I was going to run into the fertile ground, you know, certainly in Bozeman as well, but especially here in Missoula and around the University of Montana, with Paul's work at the launch pad and the Accelerate Montana system and all the things that Carl suggested. I mean, that was entirely different than I grew up around. And opportunities now for kids in Shelby who, you know, if there's somebody from Shelby on this call, you're in the right place, because
and there's actually, so Lorette says, hey, good to see you, Shelby voice. Thanks for sharing.
That's awesome.
Lorette Carter, yeah.
That's awesome that there's somebody from Shelby on this. That's fantastic. So, I mean, stuff like this just did not exist. And now it does. And now there's no reason that somebody from the same place that I grew up can't have access to the same tools that I presently have access to. And that's amazing. And we're going to see more of that, I think, in the post-COVID world, which may not be a post-COVID world, right? It may just be the world after COVID, insofar as that a lot of the things that we're implementing now will turn out to be positives that we keep. There will certainly be a lot of things, and hopefully fear is a big one of them, that abate and that change, and that will be post-COVID. But that some of the things we're doing right now that we're doing out of necessity, because Carl can't be in a car running all over the country doing these face-to-face. This is how a lot of business is going to get done. And it's sort of the end game of a lot of the things that started happening when the Napsters and the Ayumas of the world started putting music out digitally on the internet in the mid-90s. It's kind of all come in this direction, and there are positives and negatives about it, but it's very, very exciting time. So that gets us really to, go ahead, Carl, I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that, so that gets us to current time. I mean, one of the things that you've experienced then with is these ups and downs, but then also in the process of thinking through, or being with your partners, or talking through, what are you gonna do? How do I know where that market is? You described how that ed tech business happened to be maybe they saw some of it coming, or they saw the benefit. It just sort of accelerated what they saw coming. But you're now doing something very different. You haven't spoke to Reflex Protect yet, or that business, but maybe just give us a short intro of that, and then maybe talk about you. As I understand, you were focused on hospitals because Reflex Protect is a self-protect device, or it's a material. It's just not just a material. It's the device itself, right? To protect people. And you were focusing on hospitals, and that changed overnight. That all of a sudden they were focusing on, obviously, on something very different. So maybe give us a little bit about Reflex Protect, and then you were focused on hospitals and why you were doing that, and then speak to how it was that you actually decided that, and even just the process. How did you all talk this through? And before you jump into that, I just want a little housekeeping. This is recorded, everybody, so you know it's recorded. We share these up on our Facebook page and on the Bear Powered by UM page, and so you can share with other folks and all that. But I just want to let you know. And also, again, if you didn't hear this, jump on in. Joe said, feel free to interrupt him or us or anybody. Ask questions. We really want this to be like a conversation and a sharing between entrepreneurs and people trying to sort this out. So thanks. Go ahead, Joe.
You bet, Carl. Well, and it's exactly as you say, because this is all of those times that we talked about where like you could look at it as, oh my God, it's the end of the world, or you can look at it as like, wow, this is an opportunity. There's going to be a change. How can I be of service during this change and help others? And those are the opportunities that became successful. So with Reflex Protect, what happened was I was here, I was involved with the launch pad, I was excited about what they were doing, and I actually said to Paul, this is going to happen. It always does. Someone's going to come to me with a great idea, and when they do, I'm not going to be able to resist it. But what if we ran it through the launch pad? What if we ran it through your entire system here, just to see what would happen? I mean, I've done this before. I don't have to do that, but wouldn't it be interesting to see what happens if we actually follow guidebooks and rules that you guys have established and are advising people on, instead of just doing it seat of the pants like entrepreneurs always do? And he thought that was fascinating. And I'm so grateful that he did and that we were able to do that, because it's been tremendous experience. And it allows us to share as we go and input from others, because it was only days after that conversation that Steve Mangold approached me, and he had a new product, a new patented spray head. And for Montanans, this is easy. He was trying to make a better bear spray. And he recognized that, bear sprays basically come in a European car fire extinguisher. That's what that thing is. And, it has its positives and negatives, and it certainly works if you're able to deploy it properly. But when it doesn't work is when you drop it, or you can't get the safety off, or things like that. So he said, well, why don't we have something that's more intuitive, easier to use, that you can just grab and hold on to? And that's what he developed. And I'll kind of hold this up just so you get a sense. The pistol style spray head here, the Reflex Technology spray head, is what makes for a better deployment device on a lot of our stuff. So I saw it, and he said, look, I got a problem, which is to do a bear spray, I need EPA approval, and that's going to take a long time and some money. So I am interested in doing something that's maybe an alternative to a loaded gun in a nightstand drawer. And Steve's an NRA guy, but he recognized that there were people for whom, a gun isn't always the answer, and people for whom it's never the answer, and maybe this could be helpful. Well, of course, he put it in my hands, and I thought back to Pettit and Martin 25 years earlier, and thought, had this been in the hands of a receptionist there, my whole life could have been different. My whole life path could have been different. And frankly, I actually think that there's something to my being here, in this time, in this place, to do this thing, because it landed in my lap like that. And I took it to Paul, and he said, yeah, this is great. Let's run this through the system. Let's see if we're crazy. We just think it's great, but it really is. And so we did all the steps. We went out and had a small raise. And one of the first places we took the concept of a workplace product was St. Pat's Hospital here in Missoula, where I was introduced to a guy named Sean Paul, who was then the head of security for Western Montana Providence. And I was told to meet with him. They said he wants to meet with you. And I went in and I showed him what we had, and he proceeded to tell me everything that was wrong with my product, which, that's kind of off-putting. It's not necessarily what you think is going to be a good meeting. But again, that in that meeting was hidden the secret sauce of everything that we've done since, because there was method to Sean's madness. He had a problem that he needed solved. And that's what every entrepreneur looks for all the time. And the problem he needed to have solved was that he had been informed by the Joint Commission and OSHA that all of the wasp spray that the nurses had been squirreling around in different places in the hospital to use on potentially violent assailants, whether it was, a patient who was out of his mind, or if it was somebody who was coming into the hospital, maybe somebody going to the pharmacy trying to steal drugs, whatever it was, they had wasp spray around because they can't have guns in a hospital, of course, and you can't have pepper sprays because it gets everywhere. Pepper spray is a real problem in hospitals and really almost anywhere indoors. It gets everywhere. It gets on everything. Yes, it's effective. It's great in the outdoors on bears, and it's effective in certain situations, but indoors, not so good. And so I wasn't really aware of this. And so Sean explained to me how, yeah, I love your spray head. I can train anybody to use that, but I don't like the pepper spray that's in it. If you can come up with something that doesn't do all the bad things that pepper spray does, but does all the good things it does, and then, by the way, come up with something that'll clean it up anyway, because as soon as I spray somebody in a hospital, that person's my patient now, and I need to make them better as quickly as I can, or if there's an accident or misuse or whatever. So can you do that too? So reached out, came back with sort of a checklist of things that would make this available for healthcare to solve Sean's problem, because he said the other good thing, which was, by the way, I'm not the only one that has this problem. Every hospital in the country has this problem. Well, that sounds like a pretty good market. So we moved from pepper spray to Presidia Gel, which is our brand of an odorless, colorless, self-dissipating, sticky gel that is incredibly debilitating. It's a lacrimator. It causes the eyes to slam shut immediately, intense pain, a sense of respiratory distress. I mean, it shuts people down really fast, faster than pepper spray actually. But because it doesn't atomize and sticks to what it hits, it only affects the person that you actually spray with it. So yeah, if you accidentally get it on somebody else, we'll have to deal with that. But by and large, unlike pepper spray, it allows you to bullseye the bad guy and take him down, exert controlling force over him, as we say, from a distance. Great. And then I turned to some other folks at Montech, which is sort of when you graduate from the launch pad, you get to go to Montech and hang out with all the other cool kid entrepreneurs. And there had been a company that had gone through the system and hadn't actually made it, called Rivertop Renewables. And they had some very high-end chemists who, had just been laid off and had hung out their own shingle saying kind of chemists for hire. And I bumped into them and said, hey, I actually have something for you. There's this product out there called, well, I don't need to give the trademarks, but there are products out there that you can use if you have a bear spray accident. I said, I need something like this to clean up after this other product that I'm creating for healthcare. And they came back after looking at it and said, this is just witch hazel and water in a bottle. So I was like, great, then we can make something like that. And these guys are, they actually were behind OxyClean, it turns out, right? They just happened to be hanging out in Montech and Missoula, but they're total experts. And they were like, oh, I think we can do better than that. So they invented really the first proper decontaminant for pepper spray and the effective ingredient, which is called CS, in Presidia Gel. And it worked great. I mean, like way better than anybody's experienced. And one of the fun things actually is when we test this on law enforcement or military, and they've been through the thing, they're all like, yeah, that's some bad spray, but that decontaminant is incredible. Never experienced anything like that. So we came back to Sean, we showed him what we had, and he's like, that checks off all the boxes. We're going to do a pilot on this. And we were off and running. And so it turned out it worked for the hospital. And it turned out eventually then that meant it was going to work for the entire chain of Providence St. Joseph's hospitals nationwide. And fortunately, they recognized what Sean was doing. He's now the national head of security, and still working out of Missoula. And he was traveling a lot. We'll see how much he still has to travel after this. But they recognized his work, which was great. And we had sort of a big client out there that was interested in using this and that said, hey, this is safe enough for a hospital. And that was right as Parkland happened. And schools started reaching out to us saying, hey, we know they've got this new stuff over at the St. Joe's in Polson, was actually where it happened the first time. Can we use this in the school? And we said, let's find out. And we went through a process, and sure enough, turns out if it's safe enough for a hospital, it's safe enough for anywhere. And so that was an opportunity. Then we said, okay, now we're shifting from being this hospital solution to adding schools and then houses of worship, other businesses, government facilities, and so on. And we had this institutional solution, really, a safety preparedness, anti-violence safety preparedness solution with product. And then what we realized we had to add to that, because they were organizations, was certified training and policies and procedures so that they could implement it. So we made this, we again, just what do you need? What do our customers need? I think if we've been successful at anything, that's what we've been successful at, is listening to our customers as they said, this is great. If you had this, it would be even better. And in each case, being able to check off that box for them until we essentially had a turnkey solution that, we could deliver policies, procedures, and equipment, train you in its use, certify you so your insurance carrier was happy that you were actually doing something to lower workers' comp claims, and just take care of the whole situation. Carl, you had a thought?
Yeah, so I think that's a perfect segue, I think, in our conversation into, so what you're doing is you're constantly talking to your customers and asking them, what do you need? And even though that first conversation, what you came away with, wow, here's all the bad things with your product. This is all the reasons why it doesn't work. That actually, what it sounded like you did is you took that and you actually responded to it and said, okay, this person's in the know. I'm going to respond to those needs. That's what I guess is a historical look. Like, okay, that's a great way of how that's all happened. Have you needed to do something like that in the last couple of months or weeks even to say, okay, how do I go about that process again right now, given what my customers are needing? So how do you do that? Do you call your customers, email them? Obviously, you're not sitting down with them anymore, but
yeah, well, sometimes it's as simple as watching the news, and recognizing, like, what? I don't think anybody in a hospital has the time to return our calls right now. They are really focused on doing something important. And actually, the talk about PPE was fascinating, because all of a sudden everybody's talking about nurses and we got to get them personal protective equipment. I'm like, I've been talking about that for years. I've just been talking about it with respect to violence and people instead of a virus, but it's same concept. But we recognized we had to give people some space. We couldn't expect schools that were not in session and were trying to figure out how to do distance learning to respond to a problem they didn't have right at that moment, which was, an active shooter coming into the school. I mean, this is a great time for an active shooter to go onto a school. There's nobody there. All you active shooters out there, head straight for the school. I shouldn't make light, I don't mean to, but nonetheless, the point being, we immediately knew that two of our big customers were going to need some space. And fortunately, we're always looking to do the next thing. So one of the things that nurses had requested was, they said, this is wonderful. I love it. I feel safer at work. But the most dangerous part of my day is the walk from the front door of the hospital to my car. I actually want to be able to carry this with me. And what you've given me is sort of like a fire extinguisher, right? Only for violence. It's a station, and I can grab it whenever I need it and take it in and spray, a patient that's going out of his mind, or a bad guy that's come into the hospital and is threatening people. I can grab that like I would a fire extinguisher and put out the violence. But that doesn't help me. I can't take it home with me. So we were creating a pocket-sized Presidia gel. And it just turned that, like, this is the time for this product, because people at home now, yes, they could previously get a similar home system, but times are very uncertain. So they're going to need this. So let's step up in our program, moving forward with home personal safety and moving this product out faster than ever. And let's also make another pivot that, and it's funny because pivot, again, has this strange connotation. It's sort of like, hey, things were going wrong, so we had to go in another direction. It's not necessarily the case. Pivot to me is opportunity and response. Sometimes the opportunities are painted in a negative light. Sometimes they're painted in a positive light. But whatever they are, you have to be listening for them. And when they occur, then you have to be nimble enough to say, okay, let's restructure. So in this case, it was also to law enforcement. Law enforcement is, that's a red ocean that is well served by gun manufacturers, pepper spray manufacturers, taser. I didn't want to have to compete in that market because I had an open market of teachers and nurses and folks at home or at worship that were interested in my product. Why, easy choice, right? But it turns out that under these circumstances, the ability to do with Presidia gel what we can, which is bullseye, one person, exert controlling force from a safe distance, which is more important now than ever because it's not just about the knife-wielding assailant, it's about the potentially infectious assailant. And being able to control them without hurting any innocents, and without making a mess of the surroundings or your squad car or anything else. These things are suddenly far more important to law enforcement than they were before. So again, let's turn up the gas on that and let's start reaching out to these people and finding out what their needs are and seeing if we can respond to them quickly. And so that's what we did. And it required, of course, the whole COVID-19 thing required a real restructuring of everything. And I'm incredibly proud of my team because we saw it coming a little early, because we had some business that we were supposed to conduct in Seattle and San Francisco that we canceled. And some of it canceled out from under us. We also saw we're a made in America product, but there is like the molds that they actually use to do the plastic injection manufacturing in Manhattan, Montana, those molds are created in China. So we saw like some delay on some things that wasn't really going to have an immediate effect on us, but it made clear that there were going to be supply chain disruptions. So our response was we were among the first to move into working remotely, got everybody set up and comfortable with their ability to do that, had everybody reach out to their customers, find out who needed support and who needed to be left alone, and then kind of got everybody working on, okay, what can we do as a team to be of service here? Because the last thing you want to do is look opportunistic, all right? I mean, that's really, that's just, it's not who we are. And so, it would have been a mistake if we came off looking opportunistic, but it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what they hear. So having conversations about what do our customers need? What do people who aren't our customers need that we can maybe do to supply them to be of service? Maybe it's even things that don't make us money. Maybe it's just putting out a lot of supportive instructional or training video information about how to be safer. So one of the things we did was developed an ebook that we give away, and it's tips for being safer at home and in the workplace. And people can just download that off of our site or off social media, and it gives them some tips, some things that they can do to try to make sure that they're safer. And of course, it's got our logo on it. And if they want to follow up, they can come back to us. And if they find something that they want that they can purchase from us, great. But if not, if it helps somebody feel a little bit better, feel a little bit safer, that's important. And that makes all of us feel good as well. One of the things that I'm really fortunate about with Reflex Protect, which was not always true of all my other customers, and maybe this is something that's special about Montana, is no one is engaged with this company because they think they're going to make a lot of money. We all hope everybody makes a lot of money because that'll mean the company was very successful, which means it fulfilled its mission very successfully. So don't get me wrong. It's not like everybody who doesn't want to make a lot of money, but nobody is involved because that's what they think the end game is. Everybody is involved because they want to make people safer. So Ben Gladwin, who heads up our government sales division, was the captain of the University of Montana Police Department. And he worked with us on some training videos, and he said, I can save more lives working for Reflex Protect than I can working at the University of Montana Police Department as a captain in a more administrative role. And he left and joined us. Alan Baris is our head of active defense training. He's written the book, Survive a Shooting. He does trainings around the country and is a recognized expert. And he said, you know what? I want to join what I've been doing with what you're doing because it's going to amplify what I've been trying to do for years, which is to make people safer. So he joined us. And, you know, down the line, folks have become involved with the company because of its mission. And that's been super exciting and, you know, helps to keep people motivated. And then it actually just works as a business plan. Because then when you say to people, go out and be of service, really, you know, do what you think is best. Ask people how you can help them. Then, you know, people will respond to that and have, and that has given us a lot of the blueprint then for making the changes that we feel we needed to make as a company to survive what is a very difficult time in terms of changes in supply chains, changes in revenue structures, all of those kinds of things. Yeah, we're scrambling just like everybody else to survive. But the way we scrambled to survive was to figure out how we could be better of service. And that's in our DNA. So yeah. It was a neat opportunity.
Yeah, I heard that come up numerous times and just listening to your talk. That is in your DNA, and it maybe is in folks that are entrepreneurial, right? And they were always listening to how can you be of service, how can you be helpful for your customer. So it sounds like you've done that really in an iterative way, constantly. I mean, so it's not like, okay, we got this great product. You described this product. It sounded like, wow, you can knock it out of the park. Of course, hospitals need this. But then all of a sudden that shifted. Of course, schools need this. Okay, well, that rug kind of got pulled out. Yeah, and maybe you can help people at home and other places, but really trying to feel out where it is that those customers might be and what they need. How can you be of service to those customers? So you've done that step of it now. Just as we were getting started, you were talking about how all the trade shows are shut down. And of course, they're shut down. But for a company like yours, where you have a tangible product that, like you said, if you put it in somebody's hand, they can really understand what it does. Talk us through maybe some of the nuts and bolts that you've done in the last couple of weeks or months, just assuming that maybe there's some folks on the line that are looking at the same kind of challenges, like, okay, how might I think about doing something else other than the trade shows I was planning on doing this spring and summer?
Absolutely. And so there's sort of two big directions in that, one of which is financing the company itself and adopting a new approach to raising money, because we were going to go into a growth and expansion year anyway this year, right? It's sort of, hey, the Pacific Northwest and some other school districts and a few other places know about this. We've got great testimonials. Now we need some runway and some capital to expand this nationwide. So that was something we were going to do. So we had to look at that. And then again, like you say, trade shows, actual sales. Okay, how are we going to replace those? And a lot of it has come down to mastery of the one thing that is working well, or attempting mastery, which is what we're doing right now. And part of that was there is a new way of raising money that I think should be of interest to a lot of Montana entrepreneurial organizations, not just tech, but companies like ours that are kind of tech, because we use a lot of tech and we have an underlying patent, but we're also kind of service with training and kind of product with our products. We're not a pure, software as a service, digital delivery. And it turns out that that's where VC is these days and has been for a while. VC wants to put money into tech and nothing else. And furthermore, back in the .com day, quite literally, you could put .com after the, on the title page of a business plan and raise money on that. It was not for a long time, but you really could. For a short period of time, you could actually raise money just by saying that you knew enough about the internet to be able to come up with some kind of way that you were at least going to, let people know about what you did on the internet, whether you delivered on the internet or not. Then, that changed, but over time, it was still, that's where that's where the money went. The VC money has been interested in that, and it's slowly but surely kind of dried up for traditional businesses that simply create stuff of value, and they sell it for more than it costs them to make it. Which, tried and true method of actually making a living, but not really that interesting to VCs. But it used to be that you could at least get going, and once you had revenue and were showing that you were a company, then you could probably pick up some angel funding to try to take the next step, or you could maybe even get some VC. Now you've got to be making over $1 million a year, and in many cases over $3 million a year to get what they call seed money. If I'm making $1 million a year in revenues here, I don't need to raise any more money. Some businesses, yes, but for our business, no. So it was, okay, how are we going to do this? And fortunately, there were some new options that things like Kickstarter really created. On Kickstarter or GoFundMe, you ask people for money and they give it to you because it makes them feel good, and or they get some kind of a prize, right? They get a gift at the end, they get credit in the movie, whatever it is. But it's basically that kind of a transaction. It's not an investment transaction. It can't be, because then you're selling securities and you're violating all securities laws. So in 2017, in the Jobs Act, they came up with a way to actually have equity crowdfunding. And certain companies formed around this. They have to be registered broker dealers. It's actually the closest thing to an IPO, even though it's much, much, much smaller, because you have to go through a tremendous amount of due diligence as a company to do it. So you really have to be the real thing. But at the end of the day, what it allows you to do is reach out to people in very much a Kickstarter kind of way through one of these platforms. We use a platform called Republic. There are others like WeFunder and Seed Invest. And they collect people who are interested in making relatively small investments in potentially a lot of different companies that are in the startup space.
Let me jump in and ask a quick question there. So you were saying that typically is this relatively new opportunity in terms of fundraising? How much revenue, how much organization as a business do you have to have? So if you're brand new, like I got an idea, as we see a lot of folks at the Launchpad and at Emory, hey, I got this idea, I want to launch this. Do you have to be farther down the line than that, or what's that benchmark?
Honestly, the benchmark, I can imagine, and I'm actually writing an article on this right now. So I can imagine, like, if maybe you had 10 grand in sort of some friends and family startup money, because the process itself does cost some money. You got to do some legal stuff and some accounting stuff, and you're certainly going to want to create some things. But if you had a good enough idea that was clearly enough expressible, right? Like for us, we obviously had to have prototypes and stuff like that. But I mean, if it really were like a movie, or something that's just, you could really express in some inexpensive videos, but that was just a really bright idea. There was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I want it on the ground floor with that. You can use this for ideas as early as that. And that's pretty exciting, especially for Montana companies, because it is hard to raise money here. I mean, they're trying to make it easier all the time, and they do better when it comes to pure tech here in Montana. And they do better when, you've already got some experience and some money on your side. And there's lots of other support systems, a little money here, a little money there, the Big Sky Trust grants, those types of things. Those are all wonderful, and those can really help get you going. But there was never really that, how can I go out and raise $500,000, $1 million here in Montana? And frankly, it's hard anywhere. This is the place to do it now. I mean, it may not be perfect for every business, but for us, again, especially as everybody went into lockdown, We can't take a dog and pony show out on the road and talk to VCs in Seattle and the Bay Area and Los Angeles and New York. And furthermore, we don't want to talk to them because they don't want to talk to us. We want to talk to people, actual people who are like, that's a great idea. And I can put $200 into that, or maybe $2,000 into that I can afford to lose, that if it were a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter, I might have given them, because I got the t-shirt and I feel good about non-lethal self-defense. I think that's important. So those types of people can say, but I also think this is going to be big. I want to be involved. I want to make money on this. And I have several of these that I try to do. It's an amazing opportunity to reach out, and instead of trying to raise $1 million in one check, $1,000 checks does it instead. And so for us, we had decided to go in this direction, but it was really a question of, do we continue on this path and not pivot, even though we're facing this unprecedented situation? And we decided, yes, let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, but you can feel free not to answer this if this gets a little too personal, but how did you come about that decision? I mean, what did you bat around to sort of say, okay, do we keep this fundraising going and not pivot away from it?
A lot of it was, I felt we had to stay operational on a day-to-day basis. I needed to keep our employees employed. I needed to keep our contractors working, because we're going to be needed, and we're going to be needed when we are needed. And I think some of that is happening even as we speak. But when we are needed, when the hospitals suddenly are like, you have got to deliver a pallet of this stuff on Tuesday because the skies have cleared now and we need it now, we can't be getting back up to speed. So the idea of furloughing people, of kind of riding it out, wasn't acceptable. So instead it was, let's go full steam ahead. And what we're going to be doing to reach out, and this is the other side of it, right, is the non-trade show side. What we're going to be doing to reach out to people is going to be amplified and can cross migrate back and forth in terms of video production, ebooks, webinars, radio interviews, just helpful stuff that we're trying to do to bring people some peace of mind or give them ideas and ways better to protect themselves and their loved ones. Those are things that we can feed into the Republic campaign and create greater interest there in us being a going concern and a now company. Yeah. And then hopefully have that actually play out to where, come the beginning of summer or midsummer, that campaign has come to fruition, and we have the capital, but already are on the process of doing the things that we need to do, both to continue what we're doing now, and then to go back to the things that we had to take a little bit of a break from and be able to resurface there and actually have the funds and the capital to do that. Because we're no longer on the, okay, we'll do this now and then we'll do law enforcement later. When everything gets back to some semblance of order or normal, we're going to be doing all of it all at once. Yeah. And so we have to have capital ready for that opportunity. And so that really made the decision.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, thanks for talking that out, because I could see how all of a sudden you've got this thing that's on pause, the hospitals, schools are on pause, and then you're going to pivot to this other place. That makes sense. But if these other two things come back online, now it's you've got three balls in the air that you didn't have before. Yeah, that's it. So any questions from the group there?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Kristen, I do have one question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to certify and show them how they were doing something to lower their work comp rates?
Sure. So a lot of that was actually talking to workers' comp providers and to carriers and saying, okay, let's look at what this is. So in healthcare in particular, something like 70% of workplace violence claims occur in the healthcare setting. It's kind of a dirty little secret that I suspect is not going to be a secret much longer. And interestingly, I think that the caregivers are going to come out of this with a lot of political capital and the ability to make some demands. And I think demand number one is going to be better pay. But I think high up on that list of demands is going to be better safety, and not just PPE from virus, but and equipment there, but also just being safer. I mean, getting beat up should not be part of the job description if you are a caregiver. And so for a long time, you know, there has just sort of been an acceptance that there's going to be X amount of workplace violence, and you know, and that you just got to pay for that. Similarly, what we really saw was then places that were implementing sort of the old run, hide, fight method of active shooter defense. They were doing trainings and people were getting hurt during the trainings. And part of that is because there was no real good response once you get to fight, right? It was a planned improvisation strategy with improvised weapons. And so people were practicing tackling, you know, a 24-year-old 6'4" police officer in a padded suit. He's not the one who needed the padded suit. You know, the teacher that had to tackle him is the one that needed the padded suit. She's the one that got hurt. So you were seeing, and we were actually in an actual meeting with a bunch of superintendents, and there was a MSGIA representative there, which is their insurance pool. And he was talking to them about, you're basically saying the free training that you're getting is costing us a fortune in workers' comp claims. You should be talking to these guys, and pointed at us. And we were like, wow. And that's one of the times it became really clear how important the certified training was. The ability to say, hey, look, yes, we're still going to teach you how to take a gun away from somebody, or how to tackle somebody, or how to act as a group, but we're going to tabletop that. Because now we have something we can teach you about how to get to your reflex protect, how to use it, and how to stop the assault from ever becoming a battery. And that's become a really popular thing that then the insurers have been responding to, like, yeah, actually that makes sense. We might do a risk mitigation grant that supports some of the cost of implementing this solution or testing it out, and it may ultimately mean lower costs of premiums, but it also just lowers costs in general. And where it really helps is things like worker retention. So those became attractive propositions that we could explain to people. And similarly, I think I haven't really talked that much about the training, but again, our training was developed so that Sean Paul at St. Pat's could teach everybody how to use our product and have them watch a video and you know, check off the box that they'd watched it and get a printed certificate that he could show to his insurers. But Sean said, there's also a me at every one of our other hospitals around the country. I can't go to every one of them and do this. I need to be able to do something online to train them to know about Reflex Protect like I now know about it. Can you do that? So we created that really just originally to kind of answer that one need. Well, now, for example, today, our head of active training was supposed to be at Billings Clinic teaching everybody how to use Presidia gel there, because they're now implementing the Reflex Protect Active Defense solution at Billings Clinic. He can't go. He can't be there. But it doesn't matter, because we can deliver to people there a full set of lesson plans and materials that turn them into a trainer, that certify them as a trainer for us, who can then train all of their people and get their certifications, and all of it happens online. And to the best of my knowledge, we're the only company that can do that, and then also provide the actual product to you. So we can have an entire relationship, successful relationship, one-off with Billings Clinic, or with an entire organization like St. Pat's, or with schools anywhere, or a church somewhere, whereby they find out about us, they get the information, they become certified trainers and instructors in the use of our product and all the legalities and policies and procedures around that. And they teach their own people, and we certify them through that. And all of this happens at a distance without anybody having to travel, without anybody having to go into anybody else's offices. And that's, you know, something now that we were building for other reasons that's now become important and something we're emphasizing because now there's another reason that people aren't going to be traveling or visiting other people's places.
That's a great segue too. I mean, I think we're going to be speaking a bit with Austin Walker on Wednesday. He's a UM grad. About online marketing, but also the processes of just going online and connecting with your customers that way. So maybe Joe, we have you back on to talk about the nuts and bolts of that process, but that's a major piece now we recognize for rural Montana businesses is how do you actually do, as you just described, take what you were going to do in person and now deliver that same value to your customer, but do it remotely. Right. And all the different ways you can do that, whether it's video, Zoom like this, polls. I just put a poll up there to kind of gather some information about us, about folks that are online, that kind of thing. I mean, how do we use it? And honestly, I'm learning as we go as well. Like these last few weeks has been a steep learning curve for me.
And everybody is, and that's kind of the good news, right? We're all in the same boat. Everybody's learning. So, you know, now is the time to put in the effort. And I'm, you know, very little of this is actually being done by me, right? I just sort of hold it together with smoke and mirrors and glue. I've got really good people who are really good at certain things. And, you know, that's the thing, is it being able, whether it's somebody that you're actually paying or it's just somebody who likes what they do and wants to help. And I've found a lot of both, especially in Montana, a lot of both. And learning like, okay, how best do we make use of this? I never used LinkedIn for anything other than like, well, what if I someday need a job? I guess I better be on LinkedIn because I guess that's how you get a job. That's not what it's for anymore. And some of the things that I'm learning to do on that are great and really helpful. And there's just opportunity for limitless growth right now that's really exciting. And so that's kind of what I suggest is, you know, don't think of a pivot as a dangerous thing or as a scary thing. Just think of it as an opportunity to make things better. And you know, it's being open to those opportunities over the years has proven to be some of the best, you know, non-decisions that I ever made were actually forced by circumstances. So welcoming them is probably the best advice I can give.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to close it up for sure. And just looking at the poll, one of the questions I ask up there is, you know, did you get your answers today? And everybody who had the poll said yes. So nice job.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. But being open to those changes, being open to those customers, those needs, and listening to them, right? I mean, that's a great way to close it up. And thanks for the hour. It's 1 o'clock or a minute after. Joe Anderson, thank you very much for sharing about your background and Reflex Protect and your experience. Yeah, we may just have you come back on and talk about more details, but best of luck. Sounds like you're doing marvelous things.
Well, yeah, and if anybody has questions, it's as simple as joe@reflexprotect.com. Don't hesitate. Drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'm happy to help too. Excellent. Yeah, we hear that a lot. I mean, entrepreneurs like yourself sharing amongst each other. That's really what we're trying to build out here. So absolutely. I appreciate that. Thanks for that. Good job, Ron. Right. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. We are going to sign off here. I don't see any questions in the sidebar. So happy Monday. Enjoy your Monday. And if we don't talk to you soon, we'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks, Carl. Take care.